Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. And welcome back to the Global Marketing Show. I'm glad that you've tuned in today. Before we get started, let me just remind you that the podcast is brought to you by Rapport International, who provides translation services. So from one language to another in over 200 languages. A lot of stuff out there right now about AI and translation and whether it's going to take over. We've been doing a lot of consults on strategy about how people can use it. If you're wondering or you have questions, reach out to Rapport International and schedule a free consult. And you can get all your questions answered from people who are following it closely. All right, so the tidbit from Rapport International today is from Malaysia, because within the past month, I was in Malaysia and had a wonderful time in Penang. The tidbit is about silence. And apparently Malaysians are the most comfortable of all the ethnic groups with silence. A silent pause allows them time for thought. It doesn't mean acceptance or rejection. And Westerners often find these pauses uncomfortable because we're trying to fill that silence. So let's all take a moment of silence today and recognize that that's okay. Well, I'm not going to take a moment of silence because I got a really cool guest on today. Christy Brown is joining us. She's the CEO of Dr. Noze Best. That's a company that was founded to make nasal suction devices for stuffy babies. And then they're continuing on to make other respiratory devices for children. Boy, my kids are older now. I would have loved this when they were stuffed up. She sits on numerous boards and mentors all sorts of entrepreneurs and accelerators. Prior to this, she held senior roles in global customer success at ADP, and she founded other companies. We happen to connect through Entrepreneurs Organization, otherwise known as EO, which is a global network of entrepreneurs who support each other and continue to learn about leadership. It's been a wonderful organization for me to join, and it's all over the world. And there's close to 20,000 members in it. So if you're an entrepreneur, certainly check it out. But enough about that, enough of me talking. Christy, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here.
So good to be here. Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, so tell me how you got involved or came up with the idea to start Dr. Noze Best.
Yeah, I would love to say it was the single-threaded idea that I had, but actually I have an amazing partner who is a pediatric ENT surgeon, and it was his idea and his journey 6 years ago by virtue of who he is. He happened to have a patient in the emergency room who had a young infant with Down syndrome that had been waiting hours in the ER just simply for suction. And she said to him, "I think you're a wonderful doctor. I love seeing you. However, I don't need you. I need this thing on the wall." And what she pointed to was the vacuum tube that you see on the wall in every hospital room just about across the US. It's very common. And unfortunately, it's not something that you can find at home. And he had an aha moment and said, "You're absolutely right. You should be able to treat your child at home." And with that, he began the journey to create our most commonly known product, our hero product called the NozeBot, which is the first of its kind nasal aspirator with real hospital grade suction. So it actually has been a star shaper, I like to say, in the marketplace to help parents with children at home with mild to severe congestion.
Right. So this is definitely something that is global, and you've worked in global business before. So I'm so curious. He founded it 6 years ago. How long have you been involved?
So he started the process about 6 years ago, and we formed and entered into the market about 3 years ago. I joined just shy of 2 years ago when we put the first product in market. We're almost 3 years old, and that we knew that we had something special and had great product market fit. We knew parents needed us. And so that's why I joined the company.
That's fantastic. And so recently we've been in touch about taking the product global. So talk to me about how you've developed your strategy and why go global so fast and what's happening in that. A lot of questions there.
I would say that we're cautiously going global. We've obviously identified particular areas and geographies that are of note and of interest where we are best poised to be successful. Why expand outside the US is that we're being asked from our customer base often, whether it's, Canada or somewhere in Dubai, people are somehow finding our product and they know that it makes a difference in parents and children's lives, and they're asking, how do we get it? And so from that point, we began thinking, okay, what are the first few countries we can enter, learn, and grow our experience there, and then perhaps enter other markets on a needed basis. So we recognize too, although this podcast is all about globalizing, and that's a tremendous focus for us, we still have barely scratched the surface in our own backyard. So the US is still part of our global strategy as well, where we grew in the Southeast and we grew in the Northeast, and now we're kind of continuing to tap our channels across the US as well.
In the US, how are you distributing and marketing?
If we think of our strategy, we are direct to consumer. First and foremost, our customers can find us on our website and other direct to consumer websites that they can purchase our product. We also are in retail. So there are retail stores that you can find us, and that's how we go to market. We also have relationships with some of the medical community who not necessarily resell our product, but we give them couponing to allow them to offer that to patients to purchase our device on their behalf.
Have you found it hard to get your product in the retail stores or online?
Oh yeah, in similar fashion, you could think of our archetype of globalization in two different ways. One is retail, which is just expanding and figuring out. It's equally as difficult as it is for us to enter another country. The buying process is different among every store. The buyers we interact with are different in every store. The categories we're in are different in every store. So you would naturally think we might be in baby gear, but in some realms we're placed in pumps and breast pumps because that's the most familiar thing for the store to carry us. And because we do feel like we're carving a new aspiration category, we don't fit next to the manual or lower tech electric nose suckers. And so we are oftentimes just placed in a new category.
Wow, how fascinating. Yeah. So to get them to understand and then where to place it in the store and try to catch the eyes on it because people aren't looking for it because they don't know about it.
Yeah, of course. And then couple that with, our device sells at a higher price point. It is a medical device. And we want people to understand before you buy 3 or 4 other things or end up in an emergency room just for suction, this is worth its weight in gold in many different ways because we want to save our parents from going to the hospital room for suction. It's simple as that.
Right. Yeah,
getting
that
the
makes
buyer
sense.
to understand that is a little bit of a challenge.
Okay, so then you've got all this complexity already going on in the United States, and you see demand coming in from other countries. So you mentioned Canada and Dubai. Where did you see that demand coming in?
It's been across multiple countries. Canada is our nearest shore partner in many, many ways. We share geographical borders, and it's an easier place for us to kind of export to first. However, keep in mind that our product is a medical device. So what we have here in the US is FDA clearance, and that translates into every other country. So we have to understand the compliance and certifications required in each country that we enter into. And I'm just using Canada because, again, it's easy and I can tell you the most about it. We have to understand how we go there, and first and foremost, how we register with their equivalent to the FDA. So in Canada, that's Health Canada. We also have to understand electric or medical device certifications are required. So again, in our case, it's MD-SAP compliance. And so Canada is part of the MD-SAP country list, whereas other countries have an equivalent in that regard. So there's a lot that we've had to structure and learn to cross border outside of the US, and we have to learn it country by country. So the EU, we look at in its entirety when we go through this certification process. A lot of folks who listen to this podcast might be familiar with the electronic certification called the CE. So we look at EU in that regard, but country by country, we still have to register with our equivalent for the FDA. So it's a great learning experience. I would say certainly myself and my team learn this all the time. And, I think I would love to say we're experts, but we have experts like you that help facilitate what might be needed in each of those countries. And we have to very much share the same responsibility with our consultants to make sure that we are compliant, but also we understand our go-to-market strategy and what needs to happen first. So there is just a series of processes that have to be designed, again, country by country, to make sure that we're meeting standards.
This is fascinating information, and we're doing a series on medical devices, so it's very timely. Can we dig a little bit more into, like, Canada makes sense for all the reasons that you talk about, and it's the number one country that the United States exports to because it's easy, it's close, it's understand. Canada makes sense that it's number one. Then you mentioned a bunch of other countries. How are you going through your strategy of what countries you're thinking about and why?
Well, we have built our own proprietary tool internally that we call the complexity calculator. Our COO built this alongside of our ops team. And basically we have a iteration of qualifiers that we plug in to decide what is, let's just think of it just like our suction on our device, low, medium, high. What's the lowest lift, the medium lift, and the highest lift for those countries? And then we really look at those first. It was also recommended to us first to really start with English speaking countries, because that would be easier on both our retail boxing and the way that we communicate. And we have, in some regards, reached a few of those English speaking countries first, and we are working alongside of those, but we certainly aren't hesitant. We can translate and work with translation, much like what your business does, to help us along that category too. I mean, the world is still very flat in a business world. I don't feel like we can't have resources in country that can support us. So the complexity is reduced when we use our complexity calculator. But again, it's something proprietary that we built internally just to solve this problem that you're asking about of how do we determine which country to go to first and be organized about it. When you're an entrepreneur and you are scaling your business, you're excited by the fact, oh, these countries are inquiring and we can make sales. Well, they can also be a distraction because that process could take you a year or 2 years to get into. What could really boost your sales faster? There's probably low-hanging fruit in other countries that would be a little faster for you to magnify and amplify your own products into. So that's how we look at it.
What have been your biggest challenges?
Largest challenges, I mean, quite honestly, we're Americans and we like to move really, really fast. And sometimes I think that gets in the way. We're not as cautious about moving in country because we just think it has to be done right now. And there really is a very legitimate process that each country has, especially for medical devices, that may take 12 months or 18 months. So where you think something can just be put on a retail shelf, even here, by the way, the retail sales cycle can be upwards of 6+ months. It's the same in other countries where we're trying to learn. And that certainly is an obstacle for us, is our excitement and enthusiasm versus our ability, I think, is kind of an obstacle.
And then how are you reaching out and doing all this? Have you built out a team? Are you hiring distributors, contractors? Where's the manpower come? Woman power.
Yeah,
Human
all
power.
Yeah.
All power.
Yeah, all power. That's a great question. And that's some of the analysis that we've done in our complexity calculator. Is one of our tenets is what resources are on the ground? Where will we have consulting resources? I've also connected with more consulates than you could possibly imagine, whether it be Canada or France or the Netherlands or Germany. I'm really connected, and a shout out to the US Commercial Service. We are a US Commercial Service company, and I have an individual on the ground here in Atlanta literally she is like an extension to our team. So they escort us in to help us find what we need. We know we aren't experts in anything in any other country. And so what we start out doing is asking all the right questions of what type of resources do we need? How do we get our product in market? We're not going to hire a sales team. So what's your suggestion for distribution points? And it is more common than I realized to have that distribution relationship and really foster that as again, like an extension of our own team here in the US. My goal is certainly not to put boots on the ground initially. We need to do what we do well in country before we expand that horizon too fast, too soon, and invest in those resources. We want it to be very expansive in that regard so that we're successful.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Who were you working with in Atlanta in the U.S. Commercial Services?
Her name is Carrie Barrett.
Carrie Barrett? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And you know Laurent
sorry?
Call down there? You know Laurent too that works at?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's an entire team, and also we have Export Georgia also that supports us, and they have a healthcare tech sector that we have an individual that is also like an extension to our team. Her name is Nolly. Nolly and Carrie together are just a force that can help us. And that's been phenomenal. I constantly evangelize out to people that are really working in foreign markets, like you have to connect with US commercial. If you're not, there's just so much time savings there. And it's not like they can do everything for you, but they can certainly get you to the resources to support your company throughout the growth. I mean, that's what the US wants to do. They want to expand and export.
Right, exactly. Our balance of trade is so far off that the Department of Commerce has the U.S. Commercial Services to help businesses export. So how did you originally hear about that and connect in with them?
Really great question. We knew about Export Georgia, and my company here in Atlanta, we're headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. We sit inside of a tech incubator near the Georgia Tech campus, and Export Georgia just happens to be a couple of floors above us. And they actually said, have you connected with US Commercial? If not, let me connect you to Carrie. And that was pretty much the facilitation of it all. Once we had that connection with Carrie, it just felt like the onion started peeling back, so to speak, because all these layers and layers of what we're accustomed to in political bureaucracy just felt like they were, falling out because Carrie could navigate things in country well in advance of us figuring it out on our own. And so we have resources on the ground in just about every single country that support our efforts. So again, going back to our own internal desire with the complexity calculator, we look at our first top 10 countries, and whatever that first 5 is, we triangulate next to Carrie and say, these are our goals and this is where we want to go and where we need help.
Oh, that's fantastic. And is there any commonalities that you can see through the top 10 markets besides, you said start in English, but is there any other commonalities, medical device authorization process or size of country or wealth of country, anything like that?
We look at all of those things, actually. We also are very keen to understand birth rates. Our devices are targeted towards children, and especially parents who are giving birth, because an aspirator is on every single registry list. And so understanding those birth rates across countries and how large the population is and the demographics are very important to us.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So if you had to give advice to a medical device company that was launching and going through what you've been through in the last few years, what advice would you give? I
hate to encourage it, but patience, I think, is key. You're only as good as your team. I mean, I don't say it enough. We have a good team. I have an individual that's very specialized in healthcare and product. Having that combined with the resources on the ground that can help us, we also are a very tenacious group. And so if I want to go find the consulate in Canada, I'm going to go find the consulate in Canada and make sure that there's some level of connection. And we look for where we belong. We are part of a program with the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, which is called Metro Export Challenge. So we're one of their 5 companies also, which has given us a bit more, I would say, gravitas to connect with some of these consulates and make sure that the Metro Atlanta Chamber is helping us side by side with a very business-driven climate, as is Atlanta, to identify and find, where we should export. So again, it's us looking at all those different demographics and slicing and dicing where we should be and when.
We talked about challenges. When you started jumping into this, oftentimes people have some fears that are holding them back.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, when I have talked to other people in your company, there is tenacious and there is this, we're going to get it done. But I would imagine there's some fears in there too.
Oh, of course. It's just like bringing new product to market. We have a fair amount of fear, but honestly, fear, and I would say failure in general, is a motivator. We don't want to fail. It's got to motivate us to keep going and finding out. Nothing has been clean and simple. I would love to tell your audience, like, oh, it's so easy to go to another country. Everything is absolutely different in every single jurisdiction. And so there's a lot of fear there. We're also building a forecast. We are a business, right? So when we forecast what we think sales are going to look like in that country, and it's delayed by 60 days, 90 days, because of something that's stuck, we can't predict that. And so there's a lot of fear with how we do this and learning as we go a bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where are you manufacturing?
So we manufacture in Asia.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you manufacture in Asia, and then you've got all the shipping and logistics to deal with too, no matter where you're going.
Yeah, another complexity. Yeah. And we're learning about that now. So rather than inbound shipments here, we have them going to 2 other countries now. And so we've worked through the complexity of that as well. And is your same logistics provider able to freight forward in other countries? There's lots of things that we have to think about in moving product, because we're not a service business. We actually are moving physical product out of one country into another. And we've definitely had to learn a lot about that.
Yeah.
As well as VAT, right?
Yeah, so talk about that.
Yeah. Understanding taxes. Some countries even have favorable tax structures where they'll delay it for a year because they really want you to do business in the country. We've had to learn how to set up businesses in each of these countries and what requirements there are to do that, and what having a registered agency looks like in country, because there is someone in country that really needs to represent you, which is why the distribution relationship is so important for us. And so there's lots of learnings. The tax is the top of mind today because we just had a conversation about that this morning. U.S. commercial over the past couple of weeks has had export week. And so there's all these online courses that some of my team has been taking just to learn some of these things that are being offered. But, it's just so unique that we know about all these available pieces of the puzzle so that we can go learn, because it's difficult. I mean, you do feel isolated when you start this process of who knows this. I mean, it's exhausting in some regard of where do I even start? And who do I talk to? And how do I get to that country? And who can help me? And what do we need to know? And you have to parallel process, we do everything, the certification on the medical side, plus the distribution relationship and the registered agency and the financial relationship and the tax setup. We've had to learn that in various jurisdictions as we continue to grow. So I could see there being tremendous fear for a small business to just take that leap. But there's also kind of the what if you did aspect of it. What if you did just go forward? How much will that help you grow as an organization? And even as a business owner or proprietor or founder, you're going to learn along the way as well. And then if you can just think 3 years ahead, what would you tell yourself, your future self 3 years from now that you learn right now?
Yes. Yeah, that's certainly true. Yeah. And there's, the Department of Commerce comes out with all sorts of statistics about exporters, and they grow faster. They have higher profits. They pay higher wages. Their IP is more stable. Their currency risk is more stable. So it's across the board. There's no negatives to exporting except that learning curve. Yeah. So when you felt so isolated and where to go and who can help and all that, where did you turn?
I went into my WhatsApp app for EO, and your brother contacted me, Wendy, and said, you have to talk to Wendy. You could tell it was a little bit of a cry for help. Because there are peaks and valleys to this where you're just like, doesn't anyone know anyone that can help? And you do get responses. And I do feel there's a nurture versus nature in this. Like, I felt like I needed a hug and needed nurturing to get through some of these barriers, or just clearly understanding, because there are parts of this translation being just huge for us. All of our devices have to have translation. Like Canada's a great example. We have to have French and English. We have to understand that. We have to have a website that is globalized. We're really focused on that now, that, if a person comes in from, and I'm using ambiguous countries, but Bahrain or New Zealand or the UK, our website can tactically move alongside of them to help them find what they're looking for. So there's things like that we've had to navigate as well.
Yeah, so I'm so curious. I ended up talking to one of your staff members about the website, and you were going to really localize down to the countries, which becomes a huge effort for a small company. And I had suggested that he consider making a globalized website with an easy navigation for language. And so I'm curious, whatever transpired, like what was your thinking around that and what's transpired since then?
Yeah, that's the direction. The ladder that you've described is what we are goaling. So same body and framework where we move down by language rather than, we can point the domain in any country to our US website.
Oh, okay. Then it
Yeah.
becomes a lot easier to manage because you've got one website that's translated. The other thing that solves is if I speak Spanish and I'm in the United States, I'm not just sent to the English website. I can still navigate to the Spanish and get the information. Okay. So I'm glad that conversation was helpful. I was curious.
Yeah. That's where we're headed today. But we still register in each country and ensure that we have the supportive mechanics for our customers to purchase from us in country.
Yes. And then for online international, you're using, is it Shopify? So what are some struggles that you're working with now that you might want some help on from somebody that's listening to the podcast?
Oh gosh, we're making just great headway with what's in place now. When I think of where we need help, it's definitely our boots on the ground, our sales process with distribution in particular countries. Who can we partner with that brings experience and professionalism and representation to the table that we don't have? We're not going to hire a resource, for example, in France and have them go do all the sales across France. It's not scalable for us as a small company. And there are distribution relationships that can do that. So that's more of what we're really focused on today. And then understanding, for example, in the European environment. So when we do our CE mark in Europe, what we need to understand is if we partner with a distributor, do they distribute in 3 countries and 27 countries and 1 country? So do we need a distributor in all 27 countries? We do need some help really outlaying that footprint of what that looks like. We have distributors and logistics and individuals in mind, but we're paralleling that to our CE process just to understand more fluidly, who do we intermarket with?
Right. Yeah. I've heard there's a challenge. I thought, there might be a business opportunity for you entrepreneurs to make a list by industry, by country, by reach, by success rate. But I have heard that going through the US commercial service, there is like more of a protection because they've built this relationship and there's some liability if you have a bad distributor, or it can be difficult to get out of a relationship in some countries.
Absolutely. They do coach you on terms and they coach you on what to avoid. And by they, I mean US commercial. They're seasoned and they have those individuals in country that can support you and they can facilitate the relationship from here to there. And it's fantastic.
Well, it is so fascinating to watch your journey. as you've gone along, because taking a medical device, which is a consumer medical device, and how to take it to market is just, it's a needed product. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about how you're doing it. Yeah, and if you ever want to market your, what did you call it? Your complexity calculator.
Yeah.
I know people who would be interested in that. There's Softland Partners is another organization that has people that work with exporters. And so I'm part of that group, and we're well connected in to support. Oh, you need somebody that specializes in that. And then you've tapped into the EO network. Well, good for you. I'm so impressed with what you're doing. Any final recommendations for people that are thinking about global marketing?
Do it. If there is a desire and market for what you have, and it's not just the US, absolutely cross the border, because if it's helping someone here, it's going to help someone somewhere else. And that is very much our mission too. We really are focused on every child should breathe and have access to breathe. And our little tool like provides that very quickly in a very unique way. And it's not a mass-produced product. It's something that's very special that parents love. So we definitely want to get it in the hands of parents everywhere.
Okay, good. And we'll put all the links to the device and where people can buy it in your website.
Sure. Thank you.
And then how can people reach out to you if they want to know more or get in touch with you?
Yeah, email is probably the fastest, and I'm happy to provide my email address as well with the links that you share, and would love to connect with anyone that has questions or even can help us in our journey.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and say your email now in case anybody's listening and they want to jot it down?
Yeah, sure. It's Christy, Christy, at drnozebest.com. And that is spelled DRNOZEBEST.com.
Good. Thank you so much for that. All right. You know, this question is coming because we end on this. What's your favorite foreign word?
It's definitely bonjour. And I even have a shirt, because I am from the South in the US, that says bonjour, y'all. I think being able to say hello in France is just fantastic, and French is used in many places other than France, but I just love the word.
Yes,
Hello.
yeah, that is a great one.
Hello
And
is so easy. Yeah.
And how they say it in France too. And bonjour, it's kind of
Bonjour.
singing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, similar in, Italy, you get buongiorno, but I love the word. I love that it hails from France as well.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good one. Well, thank you so much, Christy, for coming on today,
Thank
making
you.
the time and sharing your experience.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
So listeners, if you're out there and you learned something, particularly about launching a medical device, think of who might find this helpful, because there's somebody out there that's feeling alone, thinking, where can I start? And we talked about a ton of good resources today. So give it a 5, give it a share, and tune back in for next time. Look forward to it.
That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.